Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you're here. We're in season 10, which means we have 335 or something like that episodes at this point. So if you're one of the people that have been with us from the very beginning of this podcast, so glad this continues to add value to your life and to your work. And if you're new to the podcast, then what I'll just invite you to do is there's 335 episodes, and all you got to do is Google my name, Jason Barger, and whatever topic around leadership, culture, emotional intelligence, strengths, trust, whatever it is you're looking for, and chances are you're going to find something that will resonate with you. You're also going to stumble into some episodes with, like today will be an example of, where I've been fortunate to have friends and thought leaders and folks from around the world join me in conversations around developing people and culture, and I think you'll find those conversations to be enlivening to you as well. My commitment every time that I record one of these is I want this to be a place in your day and in your life for you to step back, to have a little oxygen breathed into you, and to think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work. And so I'm so glad that you are with us today. I keep being reminded of this. If you'll do me the quick favor, if you'll rate the podcast, of course, 5 stars on whatever platform you're on. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. I keep being told that you got to keep reminding people of that, so I'm doing my duty there. If you'll leave an authentic review in your own words, in the world of AI chatbots and all that, if you use your own words and say, hey, this episode resonated with me and here's why, that helps other people find the episodes. And every time you share an episode with your friends, colleagues, teams, social media, whatever, and say, hey, let's listen to this and then talk about it, that's how these messages are amplified further in the world. So thanks for everybody that takes a moment to do that. I'm very excited to have my guest here in just a minute join me into the chat. For over 25 years, Marcus Buckingham has been the world's leading researcher on strengths, engagement, and human performance. He began his career at Gallup and was the co-creator with Donald O. Clifton of StrengthsFinder. He is the New York Times bestselling author or co-author of many books, including First, Break All the Rules, Now Discover Your Strengths, Stand Out 2.0, 9 Lies About Work, and Love Plus Work. He has 2 of Harvard Business Review's most circulated, industry-changing cover articles and has been the subject of in-depth profiles in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Forbes, Fortune, Fast Company, Today, and the Oprah Winfrey Show. I've been a big fan of Marcus's work for many years. I certainly utilize the StrengthsFinder as a terrific tool, and also had the privilege of seeing Marcus speak as he keynoted one of the SHRM National Conferences in Las Vegas years ago and did a fabulous job. And I was also there to speak about leading a thermostat culture. And so it's only fitting that I now have Marcus on the Thermostat with Jason Barger podcast. Welcome to the pod, Marcus.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Hey, man, glad you're joining me, and listeners, and that bio, of course, is fantastic. But tell us something that people might not know about Marcus. What's something that our listeners wouldn't know other than that amazing bio that I just read?
Well, I mean, as a researcher by training and disposition, that's certainly what's oriented my my life and career. But I also, in 2007, started my own business, which I built basically focused on team leaders and how can you build technology that helps them get the best out of their teams. There's a lot of technology in the world focused on human capital sorts of stuff, HR sorts of stuff, but surprisingly little on helping team leaders get the best out of their teams. So I built that from 2007 to 2017. So the entrepreneurial gene runs pretty strong in me. And that was, it's all very well. Researching and writing and speaking is great. At the same time, you kind of want to put your practical hat on and go make something that customers actually go, that's useful. And how do you build that? And how do you hire? And I mean, you talk about thermostat culture. It's like, well, if you're building your own culture, what do you do? What are the tools? What are the decisions that you made that really worked? What are the decisions you made that really didn't work? So what folks may not know about me is that was a real decade-long focus of building this business and then ultimately selling it to ADP in 2017.
I love it. I love it. No, that's cool. I'm wondering, what are your top 5 strengths? You got to.
Oh, yeah, my top 5 are futuristic,
Okay.
context, so that's the past, so I miss the present, focus, and then individualization and intellection.
Okay. All right. For my StrengthsFinder folks out there, they're gonna cue into those, and yeah. So you're a very futuristic person and somebody who loves to go laser focused on what is it that you get energy from, what is to be created into the future. Mine, I'm belief. So I got to believe in something. I gotta have a that leads me into the future. I'm an ideation. I'm strategic. I'm an activator. And maximizer is my top 5. When you think about you're on the Thermostat with Jason Barger podcast. When you think, so we talk a lot about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work. So your strengths are, that's how we're oriented. And we come to this every conversation you're part of, every meeting you're in, you come with this. This is the wiring of the way that you think. And then when you think about the temperature that you're trying to set, so what type of leader, I would just say human being in the world, how would you describe the temperature that you're trying to set in your life these days, at this stage in life?
Well, I think turned up to 11, because we're living in a world where we know when we humans, we know what outcomes we want to create as leaders. We all know those. We want our customers to come back. We want our employees to be happy and productive and stay.
Yep.
We want loyalty from our customers. We want advocacy. We know we want those outcomes. And we've chosen mostly to achieve those outcomes directively by setting goals and giving feedback to people, by setting prices and doing loyalty programs for customers. And that's okay. That works for a bit. But deep down, we all know that actually that doesn't last. We know that actually if you want to create the best outcomes, you've got to design the best experiences, because experiences drive behaviors, drive outcomes.
Yep.
So all of us really are experience makers. And if you unpack extreme positive outcomes and go upstream and go, well, what are the extreme positive experiences as customers or as employees that drive really great outcomes? The word you bump into is love. People say, I love that team. I love that company. I love that job. I love that. The word's love. Mm-hmm. And obviously over the years, I've heard that a million times, and mea culpa, Jason, I kept changing it to passion or joy or engagement or satisfaction. And those aren't bad words, but that's not the words that people use. People use love, and we can unpack what they mean by that. How can you say, I love my mom and I love those shoes, and have those words not just be different words? How can that word love mean the same thing whenever they're trying to explain an extreme positive experience? A trivial one like a pair of shoes, or a massively important one like a mentor or a mom, how can they be using the same word in those contexts? That's an interesting thing to unpack. But in terms of the temperature in my life, we know this. Humans thrive in environments where we can say, I love that. We thrive around love.
Yep.
And we're living in a world that's increasingly loveless. We're living in this increasingly transactional, extractive world where company after company after company, leader after leader seems to think that what we're supposed to be doing with humans is to design love out of things, particularly with the train of AI barreling down the tracks. We're living in this increasingly loveless world. Schools are loveless, classrooms are loveless, hospitals are loveless, workplaces. I was in a room full of the 30 top CHROs in New York about 18 months ago, and I was sharing with them the data on love and how it drives all the behaviors we want. And those CHROs of the largest companies in the world, they couldn't say the word. They couldn't even say the word, because they actually don't want environments where there's love in them. They're trying to drive love out of them, actually, as the rise of the general counsel pushes HR to the side. And now it's like, we need to protect the company from the employees. Right. So we're living in this world of increasing lovelessness, and it's not okay. It's not okay. So I'm on this podcast. I wrote this book because we're living in a world that's sliding ever more darkeningly into a world of lovelessness. And we humans hate that. And we're also super unproductive in loveless environments. And we're moving inexorably toward that. And so in the spirit of futurism and futuristic, my brain goes to, you don't get more of what you expect in life. You get more of what you accept in life. And we are becoming increasingly accepting of companies like Oracle laying off 30,000 people at 6 a.m. in the morning with an email that could be the least loving email. I mean, they're still being laid off, so that's always going to be tough. But there's ways to do that are deeply loving and human, and there's ways to do it that are soulless. And Oracle chose a sort of a soulless, despicable way of dealing with their people. And it's not just Oracle. You could go down a list of 15, 20 big companies whose leaders are accepting of this increasingly loveless world. And I think it's up to people with a voice like you or like me to add our light to the sum of light, so to speak, and go, it's not okay. It's stupid from a business standpoint. It makes no sense, but it's also morally bereft. And so it's like, hey, let's figure out a way to build really successful businesses while not destroying our souls in so doing.
Man, 1,000%, and clearly you're leaning into your gifts and your strengths of that futuristic and seeing that, hey, we as a world can do better, and our people need it, and our organizations need it, and I'll lean in with my belief is that part of this belief in that we need to believe in people. And we need to care for people in a different way. And oh, by the way, part of the narrative in this loveless world you're describing is that belief and love in people actually produces better results. Not only is it just great for the human beings that are involved, and it's going to help people's experience in the world be better, but it also leads to better results. And oftentimes I think that's the thing that gets lost in translation is it's not just about being kind for the sake of being kind, but I hope we are, but it also is about building organizations that are actually better and that people want to be a part of. One of my great friends and mentor, Howard Behar, who was the former president at Starbucks when nobody knew Starbucks, and they had 15 stores or whatever in Seattle and nobody knew them. And then they grew to 15,000 under his leadership around the world. Part of that, when he retired, and again, Starbucks, I know, recently has then had to refine some of that and is still working to kind of get back to this. But when in their roots, when they were growing, and at the heart of that, the word that they used at his retirement, that Howard Schultz used to describe Howard Behar and how they built the people side of Starbucks, was love. And they said, by the way, you don't hear this word in business, and yet it's absolutely what made us different, and the results followed.
Yeah, and I think, you look at someone like Mike Nichol, who's now the CEO of Starbucks, and previously was at Taco Bell, and previously before that, just after that was at Chipotle. Look, I don't know Mike, but he destroyed Chipotle, and he destroyed in some way, shape, and form Taco Bell. I think he doesn't understand what both Howards were in love with at Starbucks.
Yep.
That there was a love of coffee, there was a love of the product, there was a love of each other. Mike's an extractor. He's a very efficient extractor. And Chipotle made more money after he came and was the CEO, but it was destroyed as a cultural force. No one loves Chipotle anymore. And unfortunately, what you were saying about love, we should do it morally because humans thrive in loving environments. But the first chapter of the book is called The Business Case for Love. People like Mike don't really understand why love is important because they don't understand data. And that's a funny thing to say, but when we think about experiences driving outcomes, we think that the relationship between experiences and outcomes is linear. So if you measure outcomes experiences on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being strongly positive, we think that if you move a 2 experience for a customer to a 3, or a 3 to a 4, you get the same amount of outcomes increase. So if it turns out you got a lot of 2 sort of unhappy customers or 3s sort of mediocre customers, you think it makes good business sense to focus all your energy, not on the 5s, because, hey, they can't get any better anyway, but on the 2s and the 3s, because let's focus on trying to take the unhappy customers and make them content, and take the content ones and try to make them happy. Most of our approach in business is that. In fact, we put the 4s with the 5s, and we call it top 2 box, or percent favorable. And our whole strategy becomes, let's move the 2s to the 3s and the 3s to the 4 5s. Let's focus on where the red is all over our spreadsheets or all over our graphs. We'll focus on the red and try and move it into positive territory somehow. But unfortunately, the data on the relationship between experiences and outcomes is unequivocal. It's not, the relationship isn't linear. It's what's called curvilinear, which if you imagine it, if you're watching this or listening to this, imagine a J curve. Moving a 2 experience, a customer who's like not very happy, to a 3, doesn't get you anything. It doesn't change their behavior at all. Not at all. Moving a 3 to a 4 doesn't change their behavior. Not at all. It's only when you do something with a customer or something with a colleague or an employee where some sort of part of their experience was so extremely positive, genuinely positive, felt in their heart, that when you ask them about the experience, they go 5. It's only when they can say 5 that we can see a significant and dramatic change in their behavior and therefore the outcomes. Behavior in terms of productivity, in terms of advocacy, in terms of repeat visits or whatever. So really 4s are 3s. Actually, 4s are 3s are 2s are 1s. When it comes to data, when it comes to the thermostat, if you like, you've got boiling and everything else is just not boiling. If you want to predict when water's going to boil, 211 isn't it. The only time you can predict water's going to boil if it hits 212. Well, the same is true of customers. So we should never put the 4s with the 5s. 4s are 1s. When it comes to predicting and driving human behavior, which if you think about it, that's the job of a leader. Job of a leader is to change behavior. That's it. That's the job of a leader. That's it. Change behavior for the better. Well, if you're going to get in the behavior change business, you've got to understand that unless you are focused on creating 5 experiences for customers and employees, you're not doing anything. So for Mike at Starbucks, and this is what Howard Schultz, I think, understood so well, and you could argue sort of Walt Disney understood so well, and Steve Jobs understood so well, and Johnny Ive understood so well, you've got to figure out how to get people to fall in love with your company, whether it's customer or colleague. How do we get you to fall in love with us? Because anything else is nothing. The world's way more binary, Jason, than we think it is in terms of predicting behavior. So the first chapter of the book is just like, what is the business case for love? Oh, the business case for love is so clear that we can say, without doubt, love is the most powerful force in business. Love is the most powerful driver of productive human behavior. If you don't know that, it's not because it's not true, it's because you don't know that. And so if you think about Starbucks right now, I don't know why we're on Starbucks, but the question for Mike is, it's 2 simple questions for Mike. Just that, 2 simple questions. Tomorrow, do we have more customers in love with Starbucks than we do today? And tomorrow, do we have more people loving working here tomorrow than today? Every investor should know the answer to those 2 questions at Starbucks. Well, what happened with Chipotle? They got less and less and less and less people saying they love Chipotle, and they made more margin because the servings got smaller. So they got more margin and therefore got more profit. But the fundamental driver of the power of that brand was how many people are in love with Chipotle. And the answer at the end of his tenure was less people than at the beginning. Okay, that's bad. We should measure CEOs on love. And if you don't have more customers in love with your company tomorrow than today, or if you don't understand how important that is, you should be gone as a CEO. You're gone because you're destroying the fundamental value of the business. Now, Wall Street doesn't really we have mystery shopper programs and so forth, so we don't really have good data on how much love is in the system. But to your point, it's not like, love is a wonderful moral foundation on which to do lots of things, but it is also the most powerful business force. And the funny thing about that is that companies don't have a strategy for it. Many companies, not all.
Yep.
But you go to the business schools, Jason, there's no class on how to maximize the most powerful force in business at the biggest business schools. There's no class on the curvilinear relationship between experiences and outcomes and how leaders can create the best experiences. Go to INSEAD. Go to Harvard Business School, go to Wharton, go anywhere. It's so bizarre to say, but there's no class on how to maximize the most powerful force in business. So talk about temperature. You can see my temperature's through the roof because it's like, this is, and Mike is getting paid $18 million a year and he doesn't understand how to build value in a business. Okay, we're in upside down world. We're in the upside down. And we need to get ourselves right-sided up.
Yeah. No, and again, and I would say not only for our organization, but for the people. You know all these stats, and I'm guessing that this concept of designing love in, again, not only into the business, but just into people's lives and how we lead and the kind of cultures that we create for people. You know all these stats that, employee engagement just hit a 10-year low, that only 23% of employees say they even trust their leaders in the future direction of the organization. Only 20% of employees say they feel connected to their organizational culture, and yet 90% of them say that's exactly what I want. I don't want to be in just a transactional kind of relationship with the people. I want to actually feel connected, but I want to know that you actually care about me, and that we together care about this mission that's greater than ourselves. So when we talk about love, not only at that CEO level, but throughout any leader and any employee across the organization, what are some of the characteristics that you say, man, we just need more? How do we describe that kind of love, which admittedly is just a word that we haven't used in business, and to your point, that we ought to be? But how do you describe that? What kind of love do we need across organizations?
Yeah, well, love's a funny word, right? Because we do use it in all these different contexts.
Yeah.
I love my shoes, and I love that movie, and I love my mentor. And it's like, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. The reason to start with the business case for love, by the way, Jason, is because once you see that love is the most powerful driver of all productive human behavior, creativity, loyalty, resilience, advocacy, innovation, what collaboration, anything really that we want, the precursor to it is love. So by which I mean, you talk to people that are incredibly collaborative, innovative, resilient, and you get them just to talk about their experience. The word they use is love. So we can either pretend they're not using that word, or we can be curious as leaders and go, what do they mean by that? Why are they saying that? And why are they saying that around the world? The research that underpins the Design Love In book was in 28 different countries around the world. Why do they use that word in Japan, in Argentina, and in Scotland? What are they meaning? And when you unpack it, we flattened the word love. The senior HR people can't even say the word. The CEOs, maybe they can say it in the context of customers. We want our customers to love our brand. Maybe there's a bunch of CEOs that would say that, but not really our people. And yet the most productive people are using that word. We flattened it at the moment to cliche. So love is either kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower, or it's sort of my family. That's it. It's either trivialized kind of romantic love, or it's my family. But actually, it's interesting. If you look at why people are using the word when they're using the word, they're always using it for the same reason. They're describing exactly the same experience, whether it's for their mom or whether it's for their shoes, which I know sounds so weird, but when you unpack it, when people say love, what they mean is feeling more fully myself over time. That's what they mean. Every human being has uniqueness inside of them. Obviously, StrengthsFinder was one way to try to get at that uniqueness, but we've got different aspects of our uniqueness, and we want a life in which we get a chance to express parts of that.
Yep.
And yet we know the world's scary, so we don't want to get to 95 and look back and think we didn't live our life, but at the same time, the world's dangerous. So we go through life armored against it, with armor plating against the world to protect ourselves. And yet any time we bump into any experience, from the trivial, like I love wearing that outfit, to the really meaningful, like I loved working for that leader, anytime we bump into an experience that allows us to take off one plate of armor and express some little part of ourselves, the word we reach for to describe that experience is love. Not like, not respect, not learn a lot from, not even trust. The word we reach for is love. I love those shoes. Why? Because when I wear them, I just feel a little more like myself. I love that leader. Why? Well, because they saw through my performance rating to who I really was and tried to set me up to succeed. I love that movie. Why? Well, because there's that one scene, which just really spoke to me, and I came out of the movie theater just a little bigger. Anything that makes us feel a little bigger, where we can take off one plate of armor, the word we describe is love. And so the size of the impact might be different. Putting on a pair of shoes, the size of the impact of the experience is clearly different than working for a great mentor. But the quality of the experience is the same. The definition I put in the book was, love means the deep and unwavering commitment to the flourishing of a human. Flourishing means feeling more fully yourself over time. That's a beautiful, deeply human yearning.
Yep.
I want to live a life where I get a chance to express some of the unique stuff inside of me. And so anything, like you go to a restaurant and you go, I love that restaurant. Why? Because they know you. They know where you like to sit. They know your favorite dessert. They remember your name. There's something about that restaurant that feels that you can open up a little. When I put on that outfit, I love it because when I put it on, I just feel a bit more like me at my best.
Yep.
That's a beautiful human yearning. Every person has it. And when we have an experience that gives us that, we call it love. So anything a company can do, even if it's tough, by the way, that phrase, tough love, right? Tough love means come in, I'm your manager. Come in, sit down. I love you. You're fired. I still love you. I am firing you because I put you in this job. It's the wrong job for you. And you can't, by the way, can you still see me okay, Jason?
Yeah, you froze
Okay.
for a second there, but you're back. Yeah.
I know I got froze, but that's, love doesn't mean soft. Love doesn't even mean kind.
Yep.
Love doesn't even mean caring. Caring's reactive, and it's a subset of love. Caring is catch me when I fall. Caring is, hey, look, I'm a manager. I'll stay behind and clear up with you to help you clean up after your shift. That's great. Caring is a lovely thing to have, but love is proactive. A loving manager goes, I'm going to move you out this job into that job because I want to change the actual expectations to fit you better. That's proactive.
Yep.
A caring teacher goes, I'm going to help you figure out how to write that poem. A loving teacher goes, unbeknownst to you, I'm going to submit that poem to a statewide poetry contest, and you didn't even know I did it. Loving's proactive. And so as you think about what's a loving environment at work, it is not one that's soft. It's not one that doesn't hold you accountable for performance outcomes. A loving environment is one that goes, who the heck are you? And how can we arrange your work so that you get to be bigger as a result of the work you're doing rather than smaller? How can we give you moments and experiences where you get to take off some of that plate of armor and actually feel like you can become more fully yourself over time at this job? And some of it relates to the culture. Some of it relates to the mission of the company. A lot of it relates to the relationship with the manager of your team. Some of it obviously relates to the actual work you're doing, and not that you should love all that you do. There's no data on that at all. Anyone saying you find a job you love, you never have to work a day in your life again, just doesn't understand how the world works. But nonetheless, if you study the really successful people, they don't find a job they love, but they do find the love in what they do, which is different.
I think that's different, and I think that's a really key point to what you're saying, Marcus, is, yeah, by the way, my listeners are going to cue into this because when you talk about love being proactive, that's thermostat thinking. Thermostat thinking is I am proactively saying, what is the temperature we're trying to set? So if I love this student, I'm going to submit the poetry, the example that you just gave. That's a proactive thing. Thermometer thinking is purely reactionary. So I'm just going to react to the things that come at me each day, and I'm going to hope that my response is good. Proactive is different. The other piece of this, I've asked leaders literally all around the world, across the country, certainly across the United States, but I've asked it in speaking tours across Latin America, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Bahrain, in Malaysia, Thailand, literally places all around the world. I've asked a question: tell me the characteristics of the most influential, compelling, exceptional leaders you've ever experienced in your own life, and not one time has anybody described that kind of top of the pyramid, bark out orders, tell everybody what to do. Every single person, thousands and thousands and thousands, everyone comes back to and uses all the things you're describing. They cared about me. They loved me. I felt like they had my best interests in mind, and therefore were helping me to develop and to grow. And my listeners will also connect to what you say, because I talk about it all the time, is this kind of leadership, call it servant leadership, call it loving your people, caring for your people, is not soft. It's not about just being nice and kind. It's about, though, people at the core knowing you want the best for them as a human being, and your job is to help us to continue to grow and develop individually and collectively. Does that resonate with what you're saying in the book and what your research shows you?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I had Mike Nichols in my mind. It was Brian Nichols, who's the CEO of Starbucks. Mike was Mike was the film director. So anyway, but
they both get a shout out, buddy.
Yes. So sorry, Brian. But as I said, I don't know Brian, so he may be a jolly good chap. But in terms of the kind of leadership we're talking about the best leaders are the ones who deeply understand what humans want in the world, and also see the growth and development of the human as the fundamental moral starting point for anything. That we live in a capitalistic world, so there'll be times when we overhire and we have to lay people off. There'll be times when our business takes a downturn for whatever reason, and we may have to lay people off. I mean, the world is practically difficult. It's difficult to predict what's going to happen. But in the context of that lack of predictability, the fundamental moral focus for the best leaders is, I will care about who you are, and I will lovingly try to set up our world so that you can be at your best. Part of expressing your best is at work. Not all of it, but a big part of you at your best is expressed through work. So my job as a leader is to try to figure out how to create an environment in which you can express your best. And that's deeply loving. And when you don't think about that, when your brain is not trained to think about that, when you've gone to these business schools and come out and you really are totally disfluent in the language of love, you don't even know what it even means, then you are in a much more, you're in a much more precarious position in terms of getting people to work harder for you than they would for anyone else.
Well, and wouldn't you say it starts to take on that kind of transactional kind of relationship? So if it's only about just getting people to do things, then all of a sudden I start to see that my view of leadership is only transactional, and everything I hear you talking about, and certainly things that I talk about all the time, is that it's about a connection and transforming an experience for a person and for what it is that we're trying to create. And if we're oriented and that's the temperature we're aiming for, then we're more likely to create that than if we haven't thought about it and or we're just viewing leadership as a transactional thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd imagine a continuum with transactionalism in the middle, on the far right, you've got loving experiences. In the middle, you have transactional experiences that are extractive. And on the far left, you've got exploitative experiences. We know that we don't want exploitative. We know that we yearn for loving experiences, which doesn't mean soft, which loving experiences means those in which we get to feel more fully ourselves over time, where we flourish. We want those. But as you said, like, where do we live? Well, we live in the middle. I mean, at work, we can't even call you a human being. You're an FTE. You're a full-time equivalent, or you're a headcount. All of the human capital management systems that we live within at work are extensions of financial systems. I mean, SAP SuccessFactors is it's an extension of an enterprise resource planning tool. Same with Workday. Workday is finance first, humans second. Wherever you look, we are seen as elements of a financial equation. Now, we are elements of a financial equation, but that isn't all we are. It's not even the most important part of who we are. But yes, the leaders right now, we are living in a world where the language you're supposed to use is the language of transactionalism. And you can see it in FTE, in headcount. Marshall McLuhan said, we make our tools, and then our tools make us. And you can see that in the world of tech. The human capital systems we use to set goals, give feedback, do performance reviews, give ratings, those tools are fundamentally extractive. They're not loving. Everybody sort of hates to use them because they are so deeply, on some level, we know they're kind of humanly empty. And yet then we wonder why we don't have any loyalty anymore. We wonder why we are losing, as you said with that data before. Why is engagement at 30-year lows? Why is trust at 50-year lows? Well, You've designed it out. You designed love out. We've lived very, very clearly in the middle of that transactionalism. AI isn't helping things. I'm not saying that AI can't be used lovingly, but it's not really helping. The most famous love poet of the last 100 years is Pablo Neruda. And Pablo Neruda's lovely 3 lines on love are that love is born in savoring, it lives in intelligence, and it dies from neglect. You don't kill love, you just stop talking about it anymore. And that's where we are at the moment. I think, other than folks like you, Jason, it's like we're living in a world where, going back to Brian Nichol, Brian doesn't talk about love. He doesn't know what that is. Both Howards did, but you could argue Walt Disney did. You look at the leaders who've gone, I mean, Steve Jobs, clearly, I'm not saying he's a perfect leader, but he knew what love of design was all about. Either you fall in love with Apple or the brand evaporates or dissipates. And so we're in this very interesting time where we humans, we know what we lean into. We know when we give of our best, and it's wrapped in loving experiences. But the world we're living in is increasingly not that, and doesn't even really quite know how to talk about that.
Yeah, and so what I hear you saying, Marcus, too, is that like if I'm a listener and I'm saying, okay, I'm not the CEO, or I'm just like, what does this mean for my life, and how do I, man, you're right, things do feel loveless, man, engagement is low, trust is low, like all the stuff we've named, like, man, what do I do? For me, and maybe it's because I'm too elementary or my brain, I'm not smart enough, but I personalize it. And for me, I take a step back and say, what does this mean for me? And so the temperature that I'm aiming to set, and what I know is every time I don't just fade away from love, but every time I double down in love, every time I bring, Mary Oliver, who said, the soul exists and it's born out of attentiveness. When I bring my attention back to, wait, what's the temperature and the spirit I'm trying to live in this moment with my wife, the relationship grows. Every time I wither and I forget about it or I don't give it attention, then you referenced, it can go away. The same thing is true. I know I'm a better father. I know I'm a better friend. And back to those engagement scores, what we do know is when people have an uptick where their mind and their heart then say, wait, hold on, I am more committed to us having a 5 experience here. We also know our performance goes up. And so this doubling down into love, for me, I personalize to say, okay, or if I'm a listener, what does this mean for my life, the relationships and the work? What does it look like for me to fall in love with today? Does that resonate with anything that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think attention is clearly the cousin of love. I mean, you can't love what you can't see. And so seeing is a precursor to loving, right? That's why, I mean, if we think about some of the things, if you think about that experience continuum, where would you put some things on that continuum? Where would you put large spans of control, for example? Like nurses are, I mean, Simon Sinek obviously famously talks about why, and you've got to have your why, which I think is, the data would support that. But the nurses, I mean, they have the why in front of their faces every single day. And yet they're the least engaged work group of any work group I've ever studied in 30 years. Nurses are. Why? Why is that? And there's many reasons. I mean, it's a stressful job, but one of them is the average span of control. I mean, no one talks about this, but the average span of control for nurses in North America is 1 to 40. There's places where it's 1 to 60. One nurse supervisor to 60 nurses. Well, that poor nurse supervisor can't pay attention to each individual nurse. If there's one nurse she's late to work because she can't drop her son off, the bus is leaving early and she wants to talk to someone about that, or there's another nurse who had a tough conversation with the doctor the previous day and needs to download or process that in some way, and maybe there's another nurse who lost a patient that they were really fond of and they lost them last week and they need to just have someone to talk to about it. All of those things are what real humans go through, and we need to be able to process and metabolize and healthily the sort of ups and downs of our emotional lives.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that with 1 to 60, so that they say you don't. So the nurses who are taking care of the people we love the most are systematically unloved. And it works for a CFO, works on a balance sheet. 1 to 60 works on a balance sheet. Doesn't work for a human. Never can, never will, ever. Why? Because of what you just said. Because there's no attention. You've created a world of scarcity of attention. And then we wonder why those nurses feel so unloved. And we wonder why our patient outcomes, given all that we spend in this country on healthcare, why are patient outcomes so bad? Why are they so bad compared to the rest of the world? It's because hospitals, many of them, not all of them by any means, and certainly the people in them are not unloving, but the system is itself unloving. Large spans of control are unloving. Why? Because there's no attention. And those poor nurses don't get seen.
Yep.
So things like that, when you start unpacking love, you're like, oh, wow, let's call things by their real name. Some of the stuff that we look at in the world that feels weird is weird because it's unloving. There's loving and unloving. And it doesn't, if something's unloving, let's take like handoffs. Handoffs are unloving. I'll take a healthcare example again. The person who checks you into the hospital is not the person who takes your vitals when you're in your room. The person who takes your vitals is a different nurse and who comes who checks on you 2 hours later. Different doctor then 3 hours later. Different doctor 4 hours later in the middle of the night. You're handed off as a patient, one healthcare professional to another. And the person who's supposed to, when you think about what is an experience, we're talking about loving experiences. Well, an experience is horizontal over time. There's a whole human, in this case you, the patient, moving through time, trying to hold on to all the details of your particular affliction or illness, but you don't really know what the details are that really matter. And so you're handed off from one, your experience is horizontal. The hospital's built vertically, with these vertical silos of healthcare expertise, and you're handed off one healthcare professional to another. That's unloving. Banks are set up that way. Airlines are set up that way. Insurance companies are set up that way so that we, as the customer, have to explain ourselves again and again and again and again to each new representative that we're handed off to. We've built businesses replete with handoffs, and handoffs are unloving. Why? Because it means the poor person has got to try to hold it all together as they move from one vertical silo to another. Super unloving. By the way, Jason, that doesn't mean you don't do handoffs. Sometimes, like go to a restaurant, restaurants function efficiently as you go from the host to the person who brings the water, to the person who you want to order from, to the person who brings the food, to the person who brings the check, although those are different people, weirdly. That's efficient for the restaurant to run that way, just like it's efficient for the hospital to run that way. I'm not suggesting we need to kind of blow that up, but we do need to call it what it is. That's unloving, and that will destroy patient outcomes in the case of hospitals, which it does. So when you call something unloving, then the question becomes, as a leader, well, what do we do about it? How do we mitigate it? And it's interesting, in the healthcare world, there's a movement in healthcare, as you probably know, called the hospitalist movement, where a couple of doctors in the Northeast figured out one of the reasons why patient outcomes are so bad is because it's so stressful for the poor patient to try to hold it all together. Let's create a role. We'll call it the hospitalist. There'll be a physician, but the simple job of the hospitalist is to explain the patient to the healthcare providers and the healthcare providers to the patient. Well, that is a very deliberate, loving move to try to mitigate a fundamentally unloving structure. Okay, that's cool. Once we can start saying, look, let's call things by their real name. There's only two kinds of experiences in the world. There's only two. There's loving experiences, which enable people to take off plates of armor and lean in, and there's unloving experiences. Once we've called something unloving, like outsourcing is unloving. Large spans of control, unloving. Handoffs, unloving. Like we could go to, once you start being able just to go, the world's binary. What do we do about the unloving ones? That doesn't mean we shouldn't do them, but let's call them what they are. They are destroying the value of our business. I mean, let's say it that way. Like AI.
Yeah.
If you put AI in to help a person, like one of the examples I quote in the book is that the chief marketing officer of Netflix proudly was at a Wall Street Journal conference saying, I wrote, using AI, 34 performance reviews in 20 minutes. I love AI. Well, you take that one example and you can go, wow, does AI add more love to the system or does it take it away? Is AI loving or unloving? Well, in her case, you could see one angle of it is that it's loving because it saved her tons of time. She could just spout out a few thoughts about each of the 34 people. AI wrote it all up, and in 20 minutes, she got done what might otherwise have taken 2 days. So for her, that feels like she can flourish because this AI tool, it's a bit like having a really lovely pair of shoes. She felt great because it enabled her to feel smart and saved her a bunch of time. So in that respect, AI is something where we can all go, I love it. But if you flip that around and you go, well, but can it love you? Because imagine you're one of the 34 people. Now you're on the receiving end of an AI experience that's being delivered by AI. Well, imagine you're one of the 34. Do you have more trust in your leader because of the AI slop that you just got given as your performance review? Do you trust her more or less? Do you understand more about what she wants for your flourishing or less? Even if you like her, those words that you're now receiving that are all about you, you now know were not written by her. You know that it was written by somebody else, and so now her intentions toward you, or to use your word, Jason, her attention toward you is now opaque. You don't really know.
Yep.
So when we think about things like, think about all the billions that are spent on, in this case, for example, creating AI experiences for customers. Let's get rid of all of our customer service people, and we'll have everyone contained by AI chatbots. Is that love? Is that adding more love from our customers, or is it taking it away? I don't really see a lot of leaders looking at investments like AI through that loving lens. I don't see a lot of people going, whoa, 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 wait a minute. If we use AI to write a bunch of performance reviews, are we creating more love from our customers or our colleagues, or are we depleting it? Because if you're thinking as a leader, as a really intelligent business leader, put moral stuff aside for a minute. The fundamental question the investment community should be asking you is, when you put in place that AI system, is it depleting love and therefore value, or is it adding to it? If you haven't thought about that, dear leader, it doesn't mean that it's not true that it's happening. It means you haven't thought about it. Well, you probably should think about it. You're the CMO of Netflix. You're publicly saying, basically, I am so happy that I destroyed trust with the 34 people I wrote those reports to. Now, this is a very smart person, but in terms of the book I wrote, Design Love In, I call that experiential intelligence, knowing how to design experiences that people say they love. Well, what she's showing there is a very low level of experience intelligence.
Yep.
And she's bragging about it. And so it's like Brian Niccol, going back to Brian at Starbucks. Howard made people, fall in love with the third space by elevating the role of the barista and having the barista connect through words on a cup to the customers.
Yep.
And it was genuine. And it was based upon the Italians' love of fantastic coffee and a third space and all of that.
Yep.
Well, now Brian's come in, and now he's legislated that you have to write words on a cup, barista to customer. And he wonders why that's not rekindling the love.
That's right.
And it's like, well, if you don't really understand that love is fundamentally a perspective on the other person and the connection to the other person and your intention, or as you were saying, your attention to the other person and what you want for and from them, and it better be genuine, it better be authentic, otherwise the whole thing rings hollow. If you don't really understand that, then you actually thought that what both Howards were good at was writing words on a cup. No. Words on a cup were a manifestation of a commitment to a coffee and to people. And writing words on a cup without the fundamental authentic underpinning just looks fake, which is what it does look.
Well, and it erodes trust because it starts to feel inauthentic. And again, for the listener out there who's saying, okay, handoffs happen in every business. And what I'm hearing you say, and again, I would agree with, is we need to structurally think about not just, yes, of course, organizations from a structure standpoint have to think about efficiencies and how do we hand off, like your example in the hospital or in a restaurant. But yet we all dumb it down and, again, put it back into your experience and say, I also have been to restaurants where those handoffs did not feel lovingly, and in the spirit of efficiency, the experience was not good. Then I've been to others where the handoffs were so intentional, and the experience was so elevated that you walked out of there saying, I loved it. The same thing is true for your example in the hospital. Unfortunately, both my parents have passed away. I know all of those experiences way too well of being in a hospital where doctor after doctor comes into the room and the handoffs have happened, and it's clear that the communication has been lost in translation, and they don't even know who they're caring for. And that is terrible. And so when we back
there
it
are
up,
patient outcomes. Like it's
no
not
doubt
terrible from a loving standpoint morally, although it is. It's like if you want outcome, you're in the outcomes business, dear CEO of a hospital. If you put the patient under significant stress through the way in which you systemically designed your service delivery or your care delivery, then you should expect to see that in suboptimal patient outcomes. Well, oh my word. We've got suboptimal patient outcomes. So, hey, your podcast is about leadership and being intentional in terms of what you're trying to, what the overall, the
culture that you're
culture
trying to
is
create.
supposed to be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but culture, if we're not careful, culture sounds all soft and kind of squishy and qualitative. On some level, it's like, hey, dear CEO, you've designed a system which is culturally empty.
That's right.
Because you just haven't thought about the human going through the experience. So that's, in writing Design Love In, I was trying to go, look, and I had Harvard publish it because I needed to have some backup in a sense to go, we're running, and this is for, you've lost your parents. I've lost my dad. I've had that experience. We all have, where you're like, this hospital doesn't, and the word we're reaching for is loving. It doesn't feel very loving. That school that I sent my kid to, it doesn't feel loving. That workplace doesn't, and yet we humans, we wither in unloving environments.
That's right.
So it's like some things but going back to, I go back to the poets. You go back to Pablo Neruda. What kills love? Forgetting.
Yeah.
That's what kills love. And
we have an effing problem.
Goes back to your first question to me. What's my, what's the thermostat that what am I shooting? Right now, I'm like, I am hot under the collar because it's like, this is not okay. And I don't know how to do anything other than what I know how to do in order to raise a flag and go, this is experientially unintelligent. This is unintelligent. The fact that we're graduating a ton more leaders out of business schools who are completely ill-equipped to talk about the thing which most drives human flourishing. They can't even say the word is like, how do we change that? So that's, it's why I wrote the book. It's why I'm on your podcast, is to try to get people to rehabilitate the seriousness of that word love and how we need to take it seriously.
I love the passion that I see in you, and I love that you're using your platform to talk about these concepts. And again, my listeners, that all of this is going to resonate with them in so many different ways. I did a whole podcast that was talking about the global flourishing study. You keep using that word that came out in the global flourishing study that came out just within the last year. But talking about what do we know from this research around the world, and it is that people, they need connection. They want meaning. They want to know they matter. They want to be, and I would say they want to be a part of the experience. And so where I go, if you're a listener and you're walking away from this great conversation with Marcus, where I start to think is, well, what does it mean for me to be a thermostat in the world? And so I start to dumb it down and say, okay, well then what does it look like for me to try to be loving and design love in to each of my interactions, to design that in my personal life and to design that into our, not only the structure of our business, but then how do we create teams and leaders and cultures that are about the experience that, oh, by the way, you're right, it's not soft, and all the research follows. Those kind of cultures that create an environment like that, they have lower turnover. I've got two big organizations right now. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've cut their turnover in half. What's the economic impact of that to that organization because of that? Massive. And the results have followed. So all of this stuff that sounds, the word love even is hard for you to hear, The business case, and I would say the human case, is here. So, Marcus, thank you for sharing it with us.
Well, it's my pleasure. And what we didn't get into, because it's such a, love's a big subject.
Yeah.
But if you reverse engineer, I mean, the main thrust of the book is if you reverse engineer love that. If you got a whole bunch of customers or colleagues going, I love that, I love that, I love that. And you go, well, how'd you get there? It turns out there's a sequence of 5 feelings: control, harmony, significance, warmth of others, growth. And it's sequential. You can't start with growth. You got to start with control. But for you as a leader of a team, or for you as an individual, those 5 feelings become a blueprint. If you want to create more love in the system, so to speak, in your own world, or in the world of the team that you might lead, you don't need to wait for your CEO to kind of get religion, so to speak, on love. You can create control, harmony, significance, warmth of others, growth. Those are feelings that you create in others, and therefore, in a sense, they are 5 sources of power. You have power. You have, I would argue, a superpower to create experiences where people say, I love that. You can do that. You don't need to wait for anyone's permission. Yes, are there some systemic things like handoffs or outsourcing or AI in some cases that tilt against love? Yes. But can you treat people lovingly in a way that's super enabling of them and helping them to flourish? Yes, you can. How do you do that? Well, here are 5 feelings that will basically guide your actions. And the book unpacks those 5. It's a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, except these aren't needs and they're not hierarchical. They're feelings and they're sequential. And that really turns into a how-to method. You want to design more love into your marriage, those 5 feelings help. You want to design love into your kids' relationship, those 5 feelings will help. And of course, if you lead people, or if you sell to people, or in the case of nurses, we've been talking about healthcare, if you're taking care of people, humans have these. Every human's different. We know that from StrengthsFinder and Standout and other things. But humans have certain feelings that lead them. Those feelings are like 5 plates of armor that you're taking off one after another after another. And if you take off all 5, that's when your heart is open and you're walking around with love in your heart going, I love that, ... And so for folks who do read the book, my point, I think, in writing it was to go, oh, my word, there's a methodology here. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but we can operationalize love. And that means you've got the power to operationalize it right now if you would but pay attention to these 5 feelings. You can do that, and you can do it right now.
That's awesome. Buddy, we could talk about this forever, so appreciate you getting on here. And yeah, it's a huge subject, and again, we could go on for hours, but the listeners might cut us off. So this is awesome, and what I'm going to say is keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for sharing your gift and your messages with the world, and for joining with people that are also trying to do that kind of thinking and shift the culture of the way that we live and work in the world. I really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on, Jason. Appreciate it.
You got it, buddy. Well, you'll see in the show notes, we'll put in things about the BuckinghamInstitute.com. We'll put in there about the book if you are interested in Marcus's work, and certainly where to find the book. But we'll put all that in the show notes so you can track it down. Listeners, again, I hope this breathes some good oxygen into you, got you thinking about that temperature you're trying to set in your life and your work. And what I'll just also lastly just say is that when we infuse that love and bring our attention back to what does it mean for this moment, for this team, for that other human being, for the culture of our work, performance goes up. And we have to remember that every single day. So thanks to everybody who subscribes, rates, reviews, all of the things that are associated with the podcast to amplify these messages in the world. And the last thing I'll just remind all of us is to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen.